There are considerations, and I think it's more about how do you manage risk. If you are trying to move into the cloud yourself and you don't have experience of doing that kind of project, I think you're going to introduce a large amount of risks to the business. And this is where service providers like Castleton come in. We have consultants that do this day in, day out, and that repeatability means that they have seen the errors and the mistakes that other people might not yet have seen, and therefore are able to deliver a seamless process and a seamless migration, therefore ensuring that where there are risks, they're all mitigated. I would say it would be quite risky because it is a complex process in many instances. For an internal IT department who are probably only ever going to have done this once, maybe twice in their career, I'd say that's quite a risky process. They won't have seen all the pitfalls. In terms of data security, there are considerations. Data sovereignty is probably the biggest one that most people will have concerns with. We've all seen what happens in cases like Edward Snowden and so on and so forth, where data for UK-based companies has been requested by the US government and it's had to be provided. It has major GDPR implications in all reality, and the recent powers that Congress have enabled in the US unfortunately does enable all US-based companies, Microsoft, Amazon and so on and so forth, to provide UK-based data on request, which does have GDPR concerns. At this time we're kind of waiting to see how that will unfold, so depending on where you put your data you need to give it consideration. Sticking with UK-based companies is obviously going to take away that risk for you, because there are no data sovereignty issues. Castleton, as an example, owns all of its infrastructure and all of its data is stored within the UK, and therefore we don't have that concern, but it is certainly something that housing associations should give consideration to, and this is where they should seek advice from service providers, their GDPR consultants or their data governance officers. In terms of barriers and fears, maybe a few years ago there were probably more fears than hopefully there are today about the public cloud. Some of the fears will be, well, I don't control my data and therefore I can't be able to ensure that it's as secure as I'd want it to be. In terms of that, a service provider such as Castleton, Microsoft and others will have greater levels of security to ensure that penetration is minimal compared to what a housing association will be able to do. We have hardware that isn't scalable for an internal IT organization. So I'd say that we can deliver more highly secure solutions. That being said, clearly when you come into the public providers, such as Microsoft and Amazon, they're going to be more of a targeted threat. So again, I think it comes down to considering what data you're going to store in the cloud and where you're going to store it. Things like Office 365 are very secure, but again, you need to ensure that you've got backup systems yourself so that you can control that data, as opposed to just 100% relying on the public cloud provider. When you write your contracts, ensure that your contracts always give you ownership of that data, so that in the event of an issue, you have the ability to recover your data at any point in time. That being said, your IT departments are probably limited in their ability to truly manage underlying platforms. So by taking that away from them and trusting your service provider to look after that element of your infrastructure, it doesn't take away the ability for the internal IT department to still manage your data. All you're doing is taking away the underlying platform management, which you're leaving in hands that do this day in, day out. Your data is still yours. You can still control who and what and when your data is accessed. None of that is taken away. So I think it's probably misconceptions most of the time, and if there are any of people who have got those concerns, then please do feel to reach out and we can talk through your specific use cases. In In terms of businesses that have made the transition or are thinking about moving into the cloud, I've been with Castleton over 6 years now, and I would say probably 30 to 40% of all of our customer base for many of those years have already been in the cloud. First steps were probably taken between 3 and 6 years ago now, when most companies decided that actually it would be sensible to migrate their backup and disaster recovery solutions into the cloud. And that's something that Castleton has now been doing for close to 10 years actually. So that's kind of a very mature product and an offering from Castleton, something that most customers are now extremely comfortable with. They don't have any concerns about using third-party providers to enable disaster recovery for them. That confidence has led to people now being able to trust service providers to actually handle all of their data in the cloud. I'd say that nearly 80 to 90% of all of our customers that we're working with now, we've got a strategic plan in place with them, either to further implement cloud for them or do a complete journey to the cloud. Castleton now has fully hosted customers in our private cloud. Probably 20 to 30% of our customers now use our cloud service in that way, and more are starting to look to do it over the next few years. In terms of where do you start with moving your business to the cloud, I think first and foremost you've got to understand the reasons that you want to move to the cloud. What are your pain points? What currently is good about your current solution and what's bad? And therefore, in terms of scoping out your business requirements, that's the point that you actually say these are the business drivers. And then I think you bring the service providers in and you start talking to them about the various different technical solutions. You may start off with an infrastructure audit to truly understand what you've got, and therefore you can create a full map of how you would get to the cloud. What would be the initial steps? How do you do the transition, and how do you do post-support? So I would say that first and foremost, understand your business drivers, understand what you want to achieve from the cloud, what does success look like at the end of your journey, and then you can be quite clear, a start, middle and a finish to your project. And then a service provider like Castleton would be more than happy to come in and talk to you about what would be the best way of moving to the cloud. When should we use public cloud? When should we use private? What are the pros and cons of each? So I would say that it's an initial business decision and then an engagement with the service provider to give you the technical advice about different ways of doing it. And then they can start talking to you about the costs and the options available to you.